Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. We are here today with the all-star cast of the most popular podcast in the Jewish world and beyond. It's called Unorthodox. I'm sure you're a fan, but if you're not, you're about to become one. And here are your hosts. First, Stephanie Butnick. She is co-founder of Tablet Studios and a host of Unorthodox. Stephanie has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. She is also the author, together with her co-host Liel, Liebowitz, and Mark Oppenheimer of, here's the title, The Newish Jewish Encyclopedia, From Abraham to Zabars and Everything in Between. Known for her insightful interviews, Stephanie hosts events for the Jewish Book Council and the Museum of Jewish Heritage. She lives in New York City with her husband Ben and their almost 2-year-old adorable toddler, Edith. Liel Liebowitz is co-founder and editorial director of Tablet Studios, as well as a co-host of Unorthodox and the host of Take One, a daily podcast about the Talmud, of which I'm also a fan. A contributor to a host of publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Commentary, and First Things, Liel is the author of several books, including critically acclaimed biographies of Leonard Cohen and Stan Lee, and most recently the editor of Zionism, the Tablet Guide. He holds a PhD in video games, a fact that makes his 7-year-old self very proud, and he's a recovering academic, a fact that still greatly disappoints his mother. He lives on the Upper West Side with his wife, the author and editor, Lisa Ann Sandel, their 2 children, Lily and Hudson, and the rest of the Jews. And finally, last but not least, Joshua Malina, full disclosure, a former classmate, although he points out he is a year younger, from Yale University. He has a BA degree in theater. Joshua made his professional acting debut in the Broadway production of A Few Good Men, written by his childhood friend, Aaron Sorkin. That's not why he got the part. He's really talented. Joshua went on to star as Jeremy Goodwin in Sorkin's critically acclaimed television series, Sports Night. He worked with Sorkin once again on The West Wing, joining the cast in the 4th season as Will Bailey. On the big screen, he has appeared in Bulworth, In the Line of Fire, and A View from the Top, among others. More recently, Joshua starred as U.S. Attorney General David Rosen in ABC's hit show Scandal, and President Siebert in The Big Bang Theory. Joshua can also be seen as Arthur Tipping in the final season of Shameless. And Joshua co-hosted PRX's hit podcast, The West Wing Weekly. And we are talking while he is starring on, or co-starring, I should say, he points out, on Broadway in Tom Stoppard's amazing Tony Award-winning Leopoldstadt. Welcome to you all.
Good job. Very good
We're
job.
Done.
That's all our time.
That's all our time. So you all together, only we're talking only a few weeks in, a few months
I'm the
in.
new kid.
So how's it going? How is this new marriage?
If you want, I'll do this so you can be candid.
Stephanie?
It's going really, really well. We started the show back in 2015, and earlier this year, our founding host, Mark Oppenheimer, announced he was leaving, and we knew we needed to replace him with someone amazing and someone exciting, and so we looked to Joshua Malina.
Drum roll.
Fill the spot.
Let's talk about Mark, because he is the creator and mastermind, right? Or was it your idea, Liel?
Oh, God, no, I got it all wrong. Mark called Stephanie and myself one Friday afternoon and said, I have an idea. How about we do a podcast about Jews? And I was nodding my head politely and then got off the phone. And like anytime anyone asks you to do something, I said, this is a terrible idea. It sounds very stupid. I don't want to do it. And I called Stephanie, who felt exactly the same way.
Why did you think it was problematic?
Because this is 8 years ago. I did not listen to podcasts then. I didn't really know why anyone would, nor can I imagine what a Jewish podcast would sound like, because to my mind, as soon as you say Jewish anything, and I think this is an affliction that some of our listeners share, and in fact why they come to the show, as soon as you put that J in front of something, it's like, oh, what are we going to talk about? The Holocaust? Israel, like it sounds already depressing. It's like, what are we going to talk about? Like, we're going to crack jokes? So we weren't certain, but we said, let's give it a run, let's give it a try. And very quickly it became obvious to us that not only were listeners interested, but they were actually interested in much smarter things than we could even imagine. They wanted to talk about what it meant to be Jewish in America. They wanted to talk about their life, and they wanted to find a way to connect to Judaism that didn't necessarily go through the synagogue or the JCC or a lot of these traditional centers that some people still love, but a lot of people don't really feel comfortable. So for all the spiritually, communally homeless people out there, Unorthodox, and we feel immensely privileged to say that, has become, a little bit of a community.
And Stephanie, before we get to Josh joining, Liel was just saying, we heard that people wanted to actually talk about this real stuff that gets to the heart of their identity and their sense of themselves as Jews. How did you know that? Was that because of letters? Was that because of angry phone calls?
You probably know this, but as the host of a Jewish show, you hear a lot from your listeners. We hear at Tablet, we hear a lot from our readers. And something really amazing about this show is that as soon as we started, not only did people listen, they wrote in and they said, I love this, I hated this, you got this wrong, but also said, here's what I want to hear about. Enough joking about Andy Samberg and Adam Sandler and Jewish, enough surface level stuff. We can get that elsewhere. What we actually want are real explorations into, as Liel said, what it means to be Jewish in America today. And so we said, okay, let's sort of start from the beginning. Let's do holiday episodes. Let's do, an episode celebrating conversion stories and people finding their journeys to Judaism. And we were really trying to meet people where they were and sort of to say, you have questions about sort of some basics that maybe you don't know where to look for. You don't want to go online and start Googling Jewish stuff, but here we have this space and you can write in and ask questions. And so we were answering listener questions on the air, and we were really pushed by them to get more serious and to get more grounded in Judaism and Jewish life.
And yet the humor persists in the best way. And that banter is clearly key to it as a fan, is that you're all constantly kind of riffing and clicking off of each other, and you had a great thing going.
Collaborative overlapping, it's called. Collaborative overlapping
Not
is Jewish for interrupting. Yeah.
So it worked, and really you had a chemistry for a long time with Mark, and suddenly there's going to be kind of a new organism kind of coming in. Was there any, before we let Josh speak, hesitation?
Has the organ been rejected?
You're totally right. We did, the three of us for so many years, we're at this unit, and we had sort of gotten each other. We knew exactly what someone would jump on, in conversation, but we knew exactly what was of interest to each of us. And so it was a little scary to think, okay, we're going to bring someone new on and we're going to see what happens. And luckily, with Joshua, we were bringing on a pro, right? He knows exactly how to be in fast-paced scenarios. He knows exactly how to, be smart and funny, and is more importantly, really, really knowledgeable and really interested in Jewish life today in America. And so that's what we were excited about, that even if it was a little awkward at first, or we interrupted each other too much or not enough, we were sort of excited to just sort of see what happens with someone new.
I mean, Joshua's Twitter handle is Jew. So that made us very comfortable.
That's his Twitter handle.
Yes.
Yeah.
With 3 parentheses around. And before we get to that, because that's a big decision, that Twitter handle. What did you think when this opportunity arose?
Well, I am an inveterate coattail rider, and my whole professional MO is to find things that are already massively successful, like The West Wing or Liebowitz, and then jump in midway and ride that coattail to success. So I was delighted. I was already a fan of Unorthodox. I had listened to it a lot. I was surprised and delighted when they asked me to co-host. And unlike usually most new things, anything that seems like a challenge, I immediately reject or try to find reasons not to do it. I think I pretty quickly said, yeah, I would love to do it.
And you have said that you also have made these decisions, and with your former podcast also with Rabbi Stutman. Is it going to actually be growth for me? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I'm certainly more of a student than a teacher. I was a co-host of Chutzpah with Rabbi Shira Stutman, and for sure I was the audience's eyes and ears and weigh in just to speak to somebody who's much more knowledgeable than I. And there's definitely an aspect of that here too. I feel like I have more to learn than to impart, but I'm going to jump in and try to be involved as much as possible. And I having co-hosted with Rishikesh Hirway, The West Wing Weekly, I know the communities that build up around podcasts, and so I love the idea of being on the foremost Jewish podcast because I know the greater community and Kahal. Community is an important aspect of Jewish life. So
our list of potential candidates had one name on it. And so it gave us great pleasure when Joshua said yes.
And I said, I don't know that I believe that, but if that's true, it's the first time I've ever gotten a role that hadn't been offered to someone else first.
So I want to get to a little bit of your Jewish bios for those who don't kind of have a sense of all of your backstories. And I actually want to start with you, Josh,
Sure.
because Liel brought up that your Twitter handle, which you changed. You can tell me when.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically my handle is @JoshMalina. So if you're going to follow me, @JoshMalina.
And you have a huge following, we should say, to the audience. A huge following and a wonderful Twitter feed.
Thank you.
But just in terms of that name change, it kind of goes to something I think that's happened to you. As
Yeah,
someone
well,
who's
first I
watched
learned about the triple parentheses. I think the day I learned about that there's a dog whistle among anti-Semitic communities and far right wingers to identify people as Jews without saying it by putting their names in triple parentheses, I thought, oh, I'm going to do that because I just like the idea of stripping away the power of something that's supposed to be a negative and make it a positive. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm Jewish. And then I was like, I could also just change my name to Jew and let's remove any doubt.
But in terms of your arc of
Yes.
how you got to be such a public Jew,
A big Jew.
Yeah.
such a big Jew, the biggest Jew.
Yeah.
But in terms of Hollywood and just the arc of where you started as an actor, I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't necessarily what you were wearing on your sleeve.
That's true. Well, certainly I've worn it on my sleeve since I was a child in the sense that it's my prime identifier. I grew up in a family and with parents that cared about having a substantive Jewish life at home. They chose to send me to Orthodox yeshiva for 1st through 8th grade. So I was always, in my mind, triple parentheses Jew. Then I became an actor, and my inclination, or I would say I had a disinclination really to share much of my own opinions about anything, because as a consumer of entertainment, whenever an actor spouts off, I'm like, who cares? You're an actor. I know how smart the average actor is. Why should I listen to your political views or anything like that? And I probably judged others for sharing it. Then the age of social media, actually prior to that, I was invited in 2000 to go to a Jewish Federation of Los Angeles rally in support of Israel. And I said, sure, I'm happy to. And they were asking me to be on the celebrity dais. And I'm not a celebrity now, and I certainly wasn't in 2000, as was evidenced by the fact that when I went to sign in, the sign-in people were like, who are you? And I'm like, I swear they invited me
Bradley
to
Whitford.
sit on the dais. Yeah, I should have. I didn't even. And so then when I got on the dais, I was like, oh, there are no actual celebrities here. And then I asked the probably entertainment liaison for the Jewish Federation, where are the famous celebrities? And they said, oh, if it has to do with Israel, even if it's just Israel has a right to exist, we can't get anybody to show up. That's why we had to work our way down to you. I was not the only name on their list. And so then I started to realize the value, and I kind of got pulled into the idea of like, well, occasionally people ask me questions. Maybe I'll talk about things that I care about more. And then social media has really pulled me into that. So I do not believe that anyone should listen to me and give any more import to my thoughts or views.
But it has mattered, and frankly, partly because of just the vacuum of those who are not.
And people will come up to me and say, thank you so much for what you're doing for our community. I'm embarrassed because I feel like saying, tweeting? I'm really not doing it.
But you are fearless, and this was pointed out in one of your first episodes. Like, you get into it with the Twitter sphere. People are responding to you, and they're being honest with you, and there is a certain courage in that, I have to say. As someone without courage to enter that fray.
Well, maybe because I'm an actor, I've become inured to the fact that lots of people don't like me. It's just, if 5 million people watch an episode of something I'm in, I assume there are 1 million people who think I'm terrible, at least. And it doesn't bother me. I'm happy to interact with those people. And so if there are, people who think I'm terrible because I'm triple parentheses Jew, delighted to discuss the issue with them.
Okay. Liel, can you give us a little bit of your Jewish bio? Because it's also taken a turn.
I mean, look at my face. I feel my Jewish journey began as soon as I emerged. It was like, oh,
well, not with the beard.
We know. No, I was born with that beard. I've had it since childhood. I am the great grandson of a famous rabbi. Grew up in Israel. I'm a 9th generation Israeli.
Can you say who the famous rabbi is?
It is Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who is considered.
I have his trading card.
You do. Collect all
Worth
three.
A lot.
Yeah. His rookie card, I hope, back in the old.
Tell the viewers at home.
He was considered the leader of the Haredi community, the Orthodox community in pre-state Israel, and a fierce anti-Zionist, someone who really believed that the Jewish state could only exist once the Messiah comes and brings it forth from heaven. And so kind of a very hardcore, theologically serious guy, and much of the family is. I grew up a few cheeseburgers removed from the faith of my fathers, and frankly, I always thought that none of this really mattered. I mean, the thing that mattered is that I love Hashem, and I have this great relationship with Him, and I believe, in Judaism, and I'm proud to be Jewish, and what I did didn't really matter. which is how I sort of skedaddled through most of my life until about 10 years ago in the most cliched way possible. The whole, oh, you'll have kids and then you'll start thinking about these things. Welcome to the show. That's what happened. And I started pondering what it is that I wanted my children to learn and what my commitments were like and really what my connection to the faith was. And then slowly, and in ways I cannot possibly explain, let alone on television, I started doing things. This is really a doing religion. You can't really be Jewish. You have to do Jewish. I started doing things, not really understanding why I did them. You know, we went for dinner one night and my wife's like, so we're getting the oysters. I was like, I don't think I'm doing that anymore. And she was like, whoa, you know, this is earth-shattering.
No oyster.
Right, no, and it was like tough for the marriage. It was tough for my friends. It's like, who are you anymore if we're not getting, you know, prosciutto for dessert? But it was, which is a thing that used to happen all the time. But it was immensely gratifying because, you know, it's another cliche of Jewish theology that standing at the foothills of the mount about to receive the Torah, the Israelites say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll hear, we'll do, and then we'll hear. The doing comes first. You can't understand these things until you actually do it. And so I've been doing a lot of Jewish for the last 11
Can you
years.
talk a little bit about, because you talked about in the podcast, you are studying and also you're praying at a different place than you used to. Was that all just organic in terms of how that...
First of all, praying was a real big change. Like, this sounds ridiculous to me. I'm having an imaginary one-sided conversation with some entity I can't see. I mean, for my entire life, this was a very difficult thing. Until I thought, okay, well, you know, we're just going to do it. Found my way to a Hasidic shtibel, which I love dearly on the Upper West Side. The sense of community, the sense of standing together with 10 people, just this idea of being in a room with other Jews. And I think there's something so magical about the number 10, because you know when there are 10 people in a room, you know that by default, you're going to love 2, you're going to kind of dislike 3 intensely, and you're going to feel kind of mad about the others. It's really an exercise in community building, not as a sort of abstract, oh, well, you know, I love the Jewish people, but I can't stand Jews. It's an exercise that forces you into a physical space with physical Jews every single day of the week. And that showing up matters a lot. You know, to receive the text from our WhatsApp group, which, by the way, is in Yiddish, which, as the kids say, is a flex. To say like, hey guys, you know, we're missing 3 for a million. Please show up now and be like, okay, fine, I'll drop everything and I'll come because I need to. It's very moving to me.
Wonderful.
That's his way of saying he did not look like a rabbi when the show started 8 years ago, the way he does now.
And Stephanie.
So what
is your Jewish story?
My Jewish story is, you know, I think a pretty standard one. I grew up on Long Island in a town that was very heavily, you know, Jewish, and I thought everyone around me is Jewish, and that's normal, and Jews are everywhere, and we're the majority, and everything is closed on the holidays. And then I got to college, and I realized that actually Jews were not. The situation in Great Neck was not replicated across the entire United States, and I became really, really interested in religion and learning more about this place I had grown up with and the intentionality of my parents who said, you know, I want to raise our children in a place where Jewishness is just present and is there, and they're not going to be the only Jewish kid in class the way, you know, had been the case for my parents. And so I think I really was struck by that. And so I started studying religion in college and then in graduate school, and I really wanted to go into journalism and sort of tell these stories and explain sort of these hidden forces in our society. And so I've been at Tablet Magazine since I was an intern in grad school and for over a decade. And I've just been really trying to be open about my own journey of, you know, growing up, high holidays, synagogue services, not much more than that, hating Hebrew school, but really, really coming to learn that there's so much about Judaism that's so accessible and so fun and so beautiful. And I want to sort of help people reach that and help people tap into that.
But you also, sorry if I interrupted.
No, please. Never apologize for that.
But I also, on the podcast, you're often the person being the most honest about roadblocks, about barriers, about like, I was bored here, I'm confused here, this doesn't make sense, this feels kind of alienating, this feels kind of almost antiquated. So is there sometimes a moment of like, I'm sort of tired of being the person who either is stuck or doesn't know?
Never, because I think that's so important to surface all of that. So many of us feel alienated in Jewish spaces. Either you don't know enough or you're scared you're going to not know the melody in a new synagogue. I mean, people don't even really know, can you just show up at a synagogue? Do you have to join? Do you have to call someone? I mean, there's a lot of structural barriers that get in the way of people, even who want to be involved in Jewish life. They just don't know how to, or they're not married, they don't have kids, there's no space for them that they feel. And so I think that what I've been trying to do, I started on this show when I was in my 20s. Since then, I've gotten married, I've had a child, and so I am on that journey of saying, wait, what is this thing that I talk about all the time, and how do I want to live it in my life? I feel like I was the unaffiliated millennial for a very long time. I still don't belong to a synagogue, but I'm deeply Jewishly engaged, and I'm trying to figure out what this means for me and now my daughter. And so I'm really trying to use this platform, so to speak, to show people that this is okay. The struggle is so much, that tension of how I want to live Jewishly is a part of our lives. That's a part of our tradition, and it's really a birthright for us. And I want to sort of be proud and publicly questioning all of this all the time.
I want to pick up on what Stephanie's saying in terms of airing whatever's kind of going on internally, which sometimes I feel like in the Jewish community, we don't want to air, whether they call it dirty laundry or kind of the truth. Like, we keep it kind of to ourselves, and why do you need to do that for? Why do you need to say that for? You don't seem to have those those guardrails in the same way. But in terms of the podcast, and when you sit down or prepare for it, like,
prepare. Wait a minute.
Well, is there any thinking about, like, I probably shouldn't go there. I probably don't want to touch this subject or actually say the truth about this. Is there any,
That's a great
where
question.
is your barometer?
Yeah, I definitely do have some. I do edit to some extent, maybe not so much on social media, but for the podcast, I will think ahead about what I might say, and especially if something is particularly sensitive. I don't want to avoid it, but I want to articulate my position in a way that won't necessarily offend anybody and that will represent truly what I feel.
You should teach me how to do that.
Well, but I mean, I have actually great respect for people who just go for it. I'm not really that person. I try to push myself to be that person more, but I do think ahead. These guys are both very good interviewers, as are you. I'm not a very good interviewer. It's because I'm constantly thinking about this next question I ask. Will it be stupid? Does it make sense? And then while I'm thinking that, the person that we're interviewing has talked about, moved on to something else. I'm like, I don't think I can even get that. So I'm more, I feel more vulnerable and inexperienced as an interviewer than an interviewee. I feel freer. Mm-hmm.
But you were very honest in the beginning, and I appreciated it with the fact that you're, for instance, on the board of Americans for Peace now.
Yeah.
And that is kind of pegs you in the Jewish community. Some people hear that and they're like, oh, he's there.
Yeah.
And can you talk about that a little bit in terms of joining this
That's like a particular pet peeve of mine too, that and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, so I'm trying to think ahead now. But I do find that we as Jews, we're often divided and we're often on opposite sides, quote unquote. And whereas I can see an organization whose vision for Israel I disagree with, but still understand that they are pro-Israel from their point of view. They're not malicious. They're looking for the best of Israel. It does burn me and annoy me and upset me when people tends to be on the right point at progressive organizations that are ardently pro-Israel and dedicated to Ahavat Yisrael, love for Israel, and a wish for Israel to live in peace, and while also hoping to protect the rights of others. When they're painted as anti-Israel, a rabbi recently on Twitter listed 7 organizations, all of which are pro-Israel, and called them anti-Israel because he disagreed with a certain vision that they have for Israel. And I don't like that knee-jerk pointing and saying, you're not Jewish or you're not pro-Israel, and so that's particular thing that gets under my skin.
Plus, look, that book that I'm obsessed with, the one that we read
Torah.
a page of a day, the Talmud, is literally a record of non-stop centuries worth of arguments between Jews who are arguing about things that they truly believed were matters of life and death because they were the living word of God. Arguing is not a bug, it is the feature. It is how Jewish life happens. And if we lose the ability to argue, and even more importantly, the ability to argue lovingly, to do so with people that we still respect, that we still appreciate, whose good heart and good mind we still love and cherish, then we've lost everything. Then there's no point to any of this exercise. It just devolves into rank tribalism. And so one thing that the show, I think, has been able to do really well, again, with no attempts to sort of beautify or sort of paper over real differences, especially myself being guilty of this, we sometimes express very hot takes on kind of hot button issues in the Jewish community. But we always do it in a way that telegraphs and kind of showcases our love for each other, our respect for each other, and hopefully, I hope people are watching and looking at that, because we need a whole lot more of that in the world today.
Well, Rana, let me just quickly acknowledge that I myself am guilty often of vilifying people with that disagree. So it's a vision. I don't want to make it seem like I feel that I am free of that which I'm accusing others of. So.
I'm guilty of nothing. But I do think yeah, I am. I think the really surprising thing about the show, not just the fact that anyone listens or continues to listen or really, really loves it and feels connected to it, is the fact that what the show ended up being is such a Jewish show, and that we disagree all of the time. And I guess I wasn't really thinking that would be, as Liel said, a feature, not a bug. And I think it's shown me the sort of just the magic of Jewish conversation. And this idea is, of course we don't all agree on everything, from things like, whether latkes are good or bad. Like, I love latkes, Liel hates latkes. I didn't think I could get past that, but I did.
You are right about that.
Of course I'm right.
You're wrong, and I vilify you.
I think that there's this way in which we're inadvertently showing people how to disagree respectfully on matters of great import and, Jewish food, so the most important thing of all. But I think that's been something that's been so useful to me in my own life, of just being on a show every week where I have to go into a room with people who I know have really strong opinions that I often disagree with, but I know I deeply respect and adore. And so I think it's been really, really a fun exercise.
We've seen this cancel culture moment, so the stakes feel higher in a way for you all to touch the things that are hot button issues now. It must, to Josh's point, give you pause of that second delay. Is this going to...
Not for a minute.
Really?
Quite the opposite. It makes us delight in these issues, because there is nothing more goyish than cancel culture. The idea that there's something that you can't talk about is a chilul Hashem. It's really an abomination, and it's profoundly anti-Jewish. There is nothing we cannot talk about, including latkes, which are the most overrated Jewish food ever made.
What's the best? Then what's the best?
I would definitely go with herring.
Herring?
Yeah, strong.
Well, I have to say, Josh, in preparing for this, I watched your cholent video, which I'm sure has gone viral by now.
It's hundreds of views.
I never knew when
tens of views.
Did you put things in there that other people?
I put eggs in on the suggestion of the Israel Philharmonic. I'd never made cholent with eggs before. You just put them in raw and they cook, and it was very good.
How did they get that message across?
They said I was making a video for them.
Okay.
Let me just say,
they're inserting subliminal messages.
Can you talk about you used a particular piece of music? Do you remember the name of it?
Oh yeah, de Maldau, but who's the composer? It was the piece that was believed, but my dad and I were trying to find an orchestral piece that we could pair to the making of cholent. And there are those that believe that Maldau was the basis for Hatikva. It turns out it's not true, but it sounds good. It's a nice minor key anyway.
And we just learned from our guest, the Chief Rabbi of England, just an hour ago in our studio, that King Charles III offered to make him whatever he wanted for coronation Shabbos. And Rabbi Mervis and his wife said, we would like some royal coronation cholent for the first time in Buckingham Palace.
Wow. Before we leave politics, Liel, some of us have watched the arc of your voice in tablet, and you talked about in a piece that I think I keep saying went viral, but I know this got passed around a lot, and I think was very strong. And you talk about the turn. And you said, if you've lived through it yourself, you know that the turn doesn't happen overnight, that it isn't easily distilled into one dramatic breakdown moment, that it happens hazily and over time, first a twitch, then a few more, stretching into a gnawing discomfort, and then eventually a sense of panic. Can you just talk a little bit about that piece and whether it's in any way kind of interweaving now in your voice on Unorthodox?
Absolutely. I will say as a disclaimer, though, that everything I'm about to say probably sounds, and to an extent might be, terrifically self-serving, because I think anyone who's had a sense of political conversion of any sort would immediately say, oh, I haven't changed. It's the rest of the world that rotated around me, which is an insane, self-centered, egotistical look. But I grew up for most of my life as a sort of a liberal progressive in good standing. I still hold many of the views that I always held, but found like going bankrupt slowly, and then all of a sudden that I could talk about certain things, that I couldn't express certain points of view, that I couldn't ask basic questions. And that bothered me to no end, because that didn't seem to me to be the liberal essence. I didn't think that liberalism necessarily had any, and still don't think that liberalism necessarily had any problem with religious practice. In fact, I think that Judaism has done quite well for itself in sort of promulgating some liberal tenets. And yet I have had the good fortune or misfortune, depending on the day, of seeing the society get more and more intolerant in the political discussion, seeing the political discussion grow more and more heated, seeing people who formerly agreed with me on a lot all of a sudden demand that I take positions that struck me as absolutely insane, including, and probably first and foremost, concerning Israel's right to exist. And it doesn't really matter how you view or rank, Israel's policies. But the moment that you come and say, well, this cannot be, I say, well, wait, why? If you come and tell me I'm against all form of nationalism and therefore Jewish nationalism is no exception, I have no problem with that. But if you say, well, all other nations get to do this, but not you Jews, well, then I have a different name for you. And it was increasingly difficult for me. I feel terribly politically homeless. There is currently no political party candidate or belief system, coherent or otherwise, in the United States of America that reflects where I am. But here's the comforting thing. I'm not alone. There are tens of millions of us, and I really do believe that there's kind of a real shift. I called it the turn because I feel it's very dynamic. It's a work in progress. And I think the body politic is going to look very different in 5 to 10 years, and I think it's going to be much healthier.
Thank you. Stephanie, I want to go to the structure of the show.
Yes.
Like, how did that evolve? Who makes those decisions? And I know Josh said, preparation, what preparation? But how are
these guys prepare. These guys prepare a lot.
How are you mapping out an episode?
So every episode, roughly, except for our special holiday or themed episodes, runs the same way. We open up with banter, which is a little bit about what's going on in our lives, the most important thing.
Correct.
Then we go into News of the Jews, which is sort of 3 news stories, sometimes funny, sometimes enraging, sometimes sad, but often will lead to a discussion. And then we have 2 guests each week. One Jewish guest and our Gentile of the Week. And so we've been doing this since the beginning, and it's a very fun segment. At the end, the Gentile gets to ask us a question, something they've always wondered about Judaism, but weren't quite sure, who to ask, where to ask, if it was okay to ask. And that actually has become, I think, the most profound part of the show. We've had really intense theological conversations. A lot of people who are, Christian come on and say, if I stop believing in God, there's no place for me in the church. But all of my Jewish friends say, what are you talking about? Of course there's this place for me. I'm supposed to be questioning all that stuff. And so it's a lot of conversations like that, which are really interesting once you give someone the space to ask a question they have always thought about or maybe didn't realize they always thought about.
I want to put you on the spot, but do you remember any others that stick with you?
We get some questions about Yiddish words, some questions about religious styles of dress, things like that.
The use of the word Jap was a big one.
Someone asked if it was okay to use the phrase Jap, Jewish American princess, if they themselves weren't Jewish. We've gotten into thorny conversations.
I will say, though, the Gentile of the Week feature has sometimes been a problem. First of all, they're hard to find. There are not a lot of Gentiles out there. We don't know a lot, and frequently, and this happened more than 3 times that I could remember, we would welcome someone and we would say, our Gentile of the Week is Maharishi Dharmasala Yogi. And they'd say, actually, I was born Richard Alperstein in the Bronx, and my grandfather's a rabbi at Temple Shevet Israel. That happens to us.
Someone once said to me,
have to do 23andMe before they...
Yes,
Exactly.
mid-interview, he said, I should tell you that before my grandmother died, she pulled me aside and said, before coming here, I actually was Jewish. And he said, but I don't think it matters. It was my mother's mother.
No.
It was like, okay, we're going to have to redo this segment.
We have some news for you.
And then
You're out of the segment.
after our interviews, we each do a mazel tov of the week, someone or something that we want to shout out that's happened that's good. And so that could be everything from, an exciting birthday, a birth, or something going on in the world. And so that's a framework that we stick with, and Josh has sort of slotted right in nicely. But we do prepare.
You get like Josh.
Yeah, don't let me badmouth preparation. Preparation is good.
But are you getting like, here's the guest?
They're actually super organized, and the people both in front of the mics and behind the mics are, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to discuss. It's funny, as an actor, I'm used to preparing a lot, but also leaving a certain percentage. If you, another actor once told me, don't 100% learn your lines, because you'll look like somebody who's learned his lines. So I err on the side of under preparation so that things are spontaneous on the mic, but I know what we're going to discuss. I know, we talked to someone with a great podcast today, so I listened to several episodes of his podcast. So.
And as this television interview is the closest to celebrity I will ever come, let me just say something I've always wanted to say. We have a great team. We have fantastic people working, but it's really true. We have an amazing production team.
Name those people. I know. I'm new, so I was afraid that I might get something wrong.
No.
I was happy to name myself.
Josh
Singer, Josh Cross, Courtney Hazlett, Robert Scaramuccia, Quinn Waller,
Daron Ruskay. We have an amazing production team, and it really is an editor's medium.
And Alana Newhouse is at the top of
the helm of Tablet Magazine, leading all of us.
She's the chief rabbi.
Yeah, she's the chief rabbi.
Here's the most terrible thing. One of the most terrible things that happened in my marriage is that during COVID, when we all went, remote, my wife
Stephanie was in her kitchen.
Stephanie was in the kitchen. I was in my man cave with my Talmuds and my liquor. But then Lisa, my wife, saw for the first time my work life, and at some point she just looked at me and said, "People do everything for you. You don't write any of it. You just go on mic and you say stuff." It's like, that's true. I'm basically a toddler. I come on this thing and I, prattle.
What about speed? I feel like there is a speed to this. It's partly why I love it. It's if something feels too laconic or wandering, meandering, I'm kind of out on the podcast.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Do you want to address that? Is that conscious, or maybe even just find words?
Address it quickly, please.
So yes, we have heard from people who say,
really fast,
I listen to all my podcasts on 1.2, 1.5 speed because I need them to be sped up, and they say, I actually cannot listen to yours because you guys talk so fast. So there is something we actually have heard from a lot of people who say, I listen to you guys because it reminds me of home. It reminds me of being in New York. It reminds me of these dining table conversations that were just chaotic and loud and smart and fun.
And it's not just this. Look, I don't think I've alienated enough of your viewers with the Latka comment. Let me try again.
I think Herring did
I hate NPR because one of the things, you would turn on the dial and you would hear this silence. Welcome to National Public Radio. To me, that is the antithesis of what radio should be. Speak. This is a high wire act. Talk. Figure it out as you go along. You never know what's coming next. Just be here in this moment and emote with other people. And to me, that's what Jews do. I mean, this is kind of.
But humor is you can fail. It's a high wire act too.
Sure, and we do often.
Which is why we have great editors who make us sound so smart.
And Joshua, as someone who's considered to be funny, is that a particular pressure, honestly? I've got to be funny today?
Yes, but I've always been volume over quality. So, if I'm hitting 30%, I'm happy. That's Hall of Fame right there, 300.
So from humor to anti-Semitism, that's a good segue.
Yes.
Sure.
Josh, you wrote, I think, or you were interviewed in saying, I think we have to be careful about what we call anti-Semitism because there is so much anti-Semitism and we undercut what we're fighting for if we see it everywhere. And we are speaking at a time, although this will be replayed forever, I hope, when there is less anti-Semitism. We are talking at a time where it has spiked or re-spiked again. Sure. It's being talked about a lot. So just how you're navigating that.
I wonder where or in what context I said that. My guess is I was suggesting that some criticism of Israel is conflated with anti-Semitism. And there's certainly in the Venn diagram, lots of criticism of Israel does overlap with anti-Semitism, but we must be careful.
I think also with Whoopi Goldberg, you said that she was contrite and people were continuing to.
I just think there's so much real Jew hatred, anti-Semitism out there that we have to be careful when we start pointing fingers and making accusations. And it's not always a black and white thing. There's some nuance to. We have to really look at what people are saying.
And what about just the general kind of atmosphere and tenor right now, and particularly in Hollywood, which you have inhabited?
I don't think of myself of as of
All right,
Hollywood.
you dabble in Hollywood.
Exactly, I've got a foot in the water.
But you see what emerges often on social media, often at peak moments of tension in Israel. But just what has been unleashed, I would say particularly in the last 6 years, that feels almost like I think Abe Foxman once said the sewer cap is off the sewer.
Well, I mean, I would point to the 4 years of the Trump presidency as helping loosen that cap. And I also think social media and the anonymity of social media has allowed people to just take what was bubbling under the surface. And maybe we're better off with it coming above ground if it was there anyway, to find it and disinfect. But I think just all bets are off and people feel very comfortable, and hatred, and not just anti-Semitism, but transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, racism are all normalized in a way that I would not have predicted.
I like that. I like Mike Crazy on the surface. This is why we disagree about Mel Gibson. To me, he's a model anti-Semite. That's how I want my anti-Semites to be. I don't want people to be like, well, nothing against the Jews, but I have some criticism of the policies of the state of Israel. No, I want it to be like, no, you killed Christ. This is a much easier conversation to have.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with him being out and about. I don't want him directing Lethal Weapon 5 for Warner Brothers, which was founded by Jews. Right. That's what I don't want.
Liel, in terms of the anti-Semitism moment, do you hear, I'm sure, a lot of geschrei, and I feel like that's coming from a real place, but do you feel like sometimes it becomes the story for a Jewish identity?
Way too often. I think if the state of Israel, and even before that, Zionism, gave us anything, it's the confidence to look up and say, when someone says, I hate you, not to argue and say, well, actually, you should get to know me first. You would really like me. It's to say, well, kindly go do to yourself something that will not be mentioned on this show, and I will have the means to defend myself, and I have, the good fortune of returning to my indigenous homeland in the state of Israel, in the land of Israel, and that to me is a tremendously important message. I also have the privilege of being, born Israeli, and so I've never harbored any of these feelings of feeling like people othered me or, meant me ill will. But I would like to see a lot more of that joy and pride and confidence, and a lot less of that kind of belly aching over, oh, who hates us now and why? I frankly don't care what people feel about us. Or even
the convincing. I think what you're also getting at, which I think is interesting, is if we make the case well enough.
The stupidest word in the Hebrew language, in fact, the only word I would excise from the holy and beautiful Hebrew language is the word haspara, which is the stupid Israeli coinage of trying to explain Israel to people who hate it. Like, why would you be having this conversation? As George Bernard Shaw, I believe, once said, when you're arguing with an idiot, make sure that he's not doing the same thing.
Stephanie, you're now raising a child. I don't want to put you on the spot in terms of your parenting, but you're looking at a landscape that your daughter's going to be inheriting. And does it give you pause in this, or at least do you think about the contrast to your own upbringing, where, as you say, Jews were everywhere, and it sort of felt like this wasn't so much front and center?
I mean, I really think things change with Pittsburgh, with the shooting at Tree of Life. And I think that for a lot of us who were raised in this country and never really thought that lethal anti-Semitism was something to worry about, I think it really put people on edge. And I think that ever since then, the political developments and things like that have made people just feel a little bit more on guard. And there's the downside to that, right, which is when you're fearful and when you're afraid. But there's also this other thing, and I think it's happened especially as social media vitriol against Jews has spiked in the past few years, is that people actually want to be proud Jews. We see all these people who say, I'm going to listen to this Jewish podcast because that's a Jewish act and no one can take that from me. And so we see people trying to reclaim their Jewish identity in the face of all of this stuff, not necessarily in response to, but just saying, if people hate me for being Jewish, I better know what that actually means to be Jewish. And I actually might really like it. And so I think that something that I'm trying to do, especially now as a parent, is say, what are the pieces of Judaism that I want to transmit? I want to learn more, and I want to know more, and I want to be able to answer questions and go to a Shabbat class with my daughter Edith and sing these songs that I sang growing up. And I think that there's just something so beautiful about it. And so I think something that we're all trying to do is just sort of package the joy of Judaism, the pride, the beauty, and show people that it's there for you if you want it. And I think that there's something that's so accessible, that's so rewarding, and that's so relatable about their Jewish identity that people just are going to want to grasp it more and more.
Great. Liel, you talked about at one point the intimacy of this show, of any podcast, but particularly this sense that people know you guys. Like they really have a kind of sense of ownership or almost like a familial connection. How is that? How do you see that play out? Like, and how do you diagnose it?
I think it's the greatest privilege of doing this, and one reason why I think I could speak for my co-host, we'll be doing this for as long as they let us, because you realize you're not just another piece of entertainment, something people watch, and this is not a knock on entertainment per se, which we all enjoy.
Easy there.
Yeah, we all enjoy Mr. Hollywood.
I have a foot in that field.
We all enjoy and love, but it's a sense of, people coming to us in times of real transition, in times of real need. They're coming to us when they convert to Judaism. They're coming to us when they lose a loved one. They're coming to us when they're about to get married. They're coming to us at all these, key inflection points in life. And what they're saying is, this is a community that feels simpatico to me. It feels like-minded. It feels accepting. It feels loving. It feels like a place where I could explore my Judaism, and to have the privilege of being a part, however small, of a mission, a movement like this. To be able to be with these people together, I really don't think about this as, oh look, we have so many fans. It really feels like people who we know, people in our community, as if we would see them in shul. We see them on the podcast, we see them in the mailbox, we see them when we do live shows, which is something that we do a lot, because it's important to us to actually hold space with these people. There could be no greater privilege than that.
Mm. And Josh,
God, you guys are so articulate.
as someone coming into
Yes.
that, I mean, you all are, in fairness to Stephanie and Liel, you are more famous than they are.
Objectively more famous,
Yeah.
yes.
So whatever that dais is,
Yeah.
is that something that you thought about in terms of just kind of both scrutiny, microscope, but also people kind of feeling again like they want a piece of Josh Malina, like they want to be closer to you, like is that?
Well, I'm conscious of it only in the sense of trying to share what that is, a piece of me, without pretending I'm an authority on anything. Mm. I mean, even on acting. If you've seen my work, I'm no authority. No, I just don't. I'm sensitive about putting myself out as if you should listen to me because I don't know what the rest of that sentence would be. There's no particular reason you should. But I am, a Jewish person who cares, and so I'm happy to be part of the conversation. So I'm vaguely aware of it, but I think of myself. I try to make it clear that I don't hold my own views in particular high regard or unassailable.
Yeah.
May I yes and you on
Yes.
Please, that's a very good improv approach.
On this one. So one of the things that we loved so much about Joshua, by the way, I call him Joshua because I love the authority, the formality.
I've been trying to.
It wasn't not important.
Wasn't just the great talent and the humor and the acting. It's like the fact that very clearly here's a person who truly is on fire, who's so passionate about having a Jewish conversation, and you could see this on Twitter, where it's funny, and you could hear it on Chutzpah, of which we are great fans, where it was thoughtful and emotional and spiritual. You could definitely see it on Unorthodox, because we're not here just to tell jokes, though on occasion we do. We're here to really try to figure out, what does it mean to be a Jew in America in 2023 when there are so many obstacles and so many opportunities and so many directions you could turn? How do we do this, and how do we do this together? And to us, that's a superpower.
I truly felt part of the team today. I think we recorded our third episode that I've been participating in, and we had an email from a listener, a rabbi, who said, "I warmly welcome you," and then just absolutely destroyed my opinion on something. I felt like, okay, now I really am. I'm fully a co-host.
I welcome you, but you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Malina.
Here's where you're wrong. And I like that.
On your first episode, I just want to give, for those who haven't heard it, just a little sample of what you covered in the first episode, because it just shows how you careen from one thing to another without necessarily a lot of interstitial segue.
We can work on our segues if that's what you're suggesting, Abigail.
Yiddish words or phrases that were being co-opted by companies. Whether you can call them Polish concentration camps or concentration camps in Poland, Liel teaching on a New York street corner for Chabad, News of the Jews, which comes with this kind of crazy jingle, and OTJ, do you want to sing it?
News
Okay.
We changed it when Josh came on.
know.
So
All
it
right.
slowed it
You
down.
should have died. You should have killed my
but
rhythm here.
No, but it was like news of the. I don't know. Why am I singing on
We'll
television?
do it.
Yeah, Mr. Broadway. Why is she
continue.
singing it?
Eurovision, Jews are genetically disposed to gastrointestinal problems.
Which got us
Breaking
a
news.
lot of mail.
I'm sure that's
We're
a
not
lot of
happy with
mail.
that segment.
I'm sure that was.
You heard it here first on our
The
show.
Milky, by the way, which I didn't sounds delicious, from Israel. This like amazing cream chocolate pudding thing. Aaron Seidman, producer of Jewish Matchmaking on Netflix. Aaron Neal, who you co-star with in Leopoldstadt, and then you actually debated a chuppah or the price of a chuppah at the end. So that's just again a sampling. For one of the things that's refreshing about it is it's very real to our dinner tables, our kitchen tables. But some might say, how can you make a joke about Nazis and then suddenly, or talk about concentration camps and then talk about some dessert in Israel? Like, was there any concern about how are we going from the soft to the?
Because that's what we do. Jewish life is bittersweet, right? We are lador vador, we're generation to generation, and I think we take the happy with the sad, and we almost perfect that as an art form. This idea of things are always tough for Jews, and we've always tried to find fun and beauty and light in it. And so, yeah, people sometimes get mad, but my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and my family laughed about things, and that is how we dealt with it. And so for me, that's authentic to me, and I think that's authentic to so many Jewish people, regardless of their experience. We say, yes, we're going to talk about this serious thing, and then we're going to pivot right away, maybe without any interstitial, segue, but we're going to go into something funny, and because that is how we survive, and that is how we thrive. And I think that that's so deeply Jewish, and people continue to write in, and sometimes they're mad about it, but that to me just feels so true to all of our experiences.
And my family were lactose intolerant, and joking about it is how we survived.
So I have to end. Tanya Singer, who is your wonderful.
She's our general manager of Tablet
and
Studios.
all around
Responsible adult.
Responsible adult, wanted me to point out there have been 8 million downloads. That's incredible. So if you have not become an Unorthodox
6 million would have been funnier, but we'll take 8 too.
God, Liel.
You did it.
Before we leave, I just want to give you all a last word on what would you tell someone about either what it's going to become or why they should watch if they've never tuned in. Start with Stephanie.
I want the last word.
Don't watch.
Can I get the last word?
Stephanie gets the last
Right.
word.
Joshua, you get the first one.
Come on, take us home.
I mean, yeah, I would invite people to listen because we will be throwing all sorts of things at you, and you need not agree with any of us. And we welcome people to have a voice and write in, and we will respond. And so I think it's just we're inviting people in to be part of our community and asking you to let us be part of yours.
Wonderful. And
That's
why
pretty
have
good.
you not
That's really
asked
good.
Joshua to sing yet? Have you heard about his talent?
No.
As someone who performed with him in Chicago
singer.
and bells are ringing.
Wow.
Yes, we have taken to a stage
Yes,
together.
it is.
amazing.
That should be a whole segment. Okay, Liel.
Well, you should join us because you would hear Joshua singing in future episodes of the. I love what Josh has said. I think that if you are looking for a place to have a Jewish conversation that doesn't feel like it's tethered to anything, that is not kind of conditional, that doesn't kind of scare you or repulse you, but rather attracts you and inspires you to do something Jewish, no matter what. It could be reading a book, it could be learning a word in Yiddish or Hebrew, it could be taking on a mitzvah or a Jewish practice. If you want to be in that Jewish conversation, we're a pretty good place to start.
Great. Stephanie.
I think we're creating a new type of Jewish community, and I think it's for people who have other Jewish communities and want more, or for people who don't necessarily have Jewish community. And it's really easy to get to. You just put your little headphones in and you press play and you go for a walk, or you wash the dishes, or you go for a run. And I think that is there's a portal into Jewishness and Jewish life that is welcoming and open and challenging sometimes, but really fun and enthusiastic. And that's what we want to be bringing people.
Thank you. Stephanie, Joshua, Liel. This has
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Tune in to Unorthodox anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Abigail Pogrebin for In the Spotlight. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.